Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Design Cuts live session. I'm thrilled to welcome back our very dear friend and the super talented Leslie Nicole from French Kiss Collections. How are you, Leslie?
Hi, Tom. I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Leslie, what are we going to be teaching today?
Well, I'm going to be walking you through using various elements, textures, overlays, photo masks to create a design with a lot of layers and depth to it. And two things I wanted to get across in this webinar was the idea of designing little snippets. So we're going to be going through that. We're going to design little pieces that we put together. And for me, that's been an important way. I've discovered that's an important way that I design, is to, instead of thinking of like always thinking one design start to finish, I do little design snippets, what I call. And then later on, that becomes like a vocabulary that builds into a bigger design.
Interesting. Is that a time-saving thing, or just it kind of harnesses your creativity in a different way?
I wouldn't say it's purposely time-saving, but I think it's kind of gives you a small win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think rather than having the pressure of thinking, oh, I have to design this fantastic design, you know, doing a little design snippet is like a small win. And also just like it's building up these pieces that you can start doing different things with.
Yeah,
And then things kind of
absolutely.
like fall together more organically almost.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see it. I was saying to Leslie before we went live, people love the pack that you're about to work with. I love it. Every time I see it, I just get ideas and I want to create stuff, which I guess is the whole point. So without further ado, should we jump in?
This is a design we're going to be working on today, that I'm going to be working on and showing you. And you can see I'll be showing you as we go along, but it's using photo masks, it's using watercolor textures, watercolor spatter, some vintage elements. So we're going to design this in 3 parts. And actually, this design is in the complete Inspirational Textures and Elements collection, because I wanted to show you kind of what you could do with the various elements in that collection. Because I've designed this collection to really have a wide range of elements that you can play with.
Perfect. I can see people already are loving the design. Beth says this design is very me. I agree, Beth. It's very me too. I love this kind of work.
Awesome.
I think it could almost be intimidating for people. You know, it looks so rich and complex, but I know today we're going to break this down and make it very achievable, right?
Yeah, definitely. Let's break it down because, like I said, it gives you a small win when you break things down. And then later on, things kind of just fall together later on, you know, as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first off, I'm going to design this kind of decal in the middle. I'm going to do that. And then we're going to, actually, you know what? First, we're going to work on the texture. So let me go over to the collection. And
we've got people. Oh no, sorry, I wasn't laughing at that. It's people are asking for t-shirts. We mentioned this, I think, just once recently, and it keeps cropping up again. So there is clearly a demand for some DC t-shirts, and people are saying they'd love to see your design here on a t-shirt.
That would be fun. Actually, I would love this as a t-shirt. I haven't done it. I haven't printed it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure the team can make a note to include you in the merch discussions that are going on behind the scenes, Leslie.
Okay, so this is the complete Inspirational Textures and Elements collection. And one of the texture collections in that is the Bliss collection, and that's a watercolor collection. And here's kind of a basic, very subtle watercolor. And I'm going to take that watercolor, and then we're going to add some depth to it with an edge overlay. And then we're going to add some text to it, some vintage French script. And these are all in the collection, but I wanted to go ahead and show you how I do that, because you can start making your own, you know, you can start taking textures yourself and doing fun things with them, putting some text with it, putting an edge overlay with it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this whole process so that you can see how that's done. It's really quick. And that, in some way, that's a design snippet. We've taken this texture, we're going to take an overlay, 2 overlays, and we're going to create that. So let me open up this watercolor texture. This is a nice subtle background texture. And then I'm going to open up an edge overlay. So that's the Get an Edge collection. And let's see, this is a watercolor edge overlay. So I'm going to open that one up. So this is black and white with transparency in it. And these are, most everything is created the same size, so they're really easy to work together with. So I'm just going to drag this over, hold down Shift so that it centers, and put that in there. And now my preferred way, we're going to colorize this overlay. And my favorite way of doing that is to use a solid color adjustment layer. So I'm going in my layers panel and I'm going to do solid color. And it doesn't really matter what color you do at the first because we can change that. But I've already selected this yellow here, so I'm going to change that to yellow. That's in my swatches. So I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to hold down Option or Alt on the PC. Hold on Option or Alt on the PC. I'm going to hover between the overlay layer and the color layer. And this little square with an arrow pops up, and I'm just going to click between the layers, and that clips that color layer to the overlay, to the the overlay. And I'm going to change that blend mode to multiply. So there we have added some depth and interest, more of a watercolor effect to that texture. I'm going to close that up. And now I'm going to open up a script, a vintage script layer. That's from my Oh So Vintage collection. Let's see. Here we go.
Oh, that's beautiful.
This is another overlay with transparency. I'm dragging that over, holding down Shift again. Nope, I put it in the wrong place. Okay, there we go.
Have they changed something? Because you just dragged that layer up and it didn't break the clipping mask of the solid color layer. I swear it used to always break the clipping mask when you did that. Maybe they fixed it because that was super annoying.
You know, I can't remember what does that sometimes. Sometimes you can break it, but usually if you're just placing it, it doesn't break it. It just becomes part of the clipping masks. So I have to take it out of that. That's the one kind of hassle with this technique. It's my preferred way to colorize, but it does have that one drawback that they can get broken apart. Okay, I'm also going to colorize this. And I'm going to show you something real quick. I do that whole process so often that I made an action. So I'm just going to do run my action, and that automatically puts a color overlay, clips it, and turns the blend mode to multiply. And I just change my color. I already had this yellow picked out, but if I didn't have it picked out, I'd go over here and just pick, you know, a yellow color from my document using my eyedropper tool there. Okay. Now, what I tell people all the time, you guys have heard me say this over and over, but when you use vintage script, it's for a mood, not a message. So we don't care what it says. And to kind of help me out with kind of making that texture, that script part of the background, I'm going to put a layer mask, and I'm going to take a brush. So I'm going to hit B on the keyboard. I'm going to hit Control. Let's see, on keyboard, I think it's right-clicking. Yeah, it's right-clicking on PC. And bring that up, and this is one of my brushes I really like for this. It has kind of a crackle to it. That's not in the collection. It's actually one of my free brushes. And I'm just going to kind of go through here. Let me bring that to hit 0 to do 100% on my brush. And I just kind of go through and just kind of make that a little more shabby looking. Just kind of, my color is set to black, by the way. Just kind of make that a little more part of the background because we don't care what it says. Okay, so this part is now done. We have our script. I'm actually going to move the script underneath the edge overlay. It doesn't really matter that much because it's on multiply, but I'm going to do that. Okay, I'm going to save this as my texture. Let's see. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I don't usually flatten things, but because it's going to be an element in another design, I'm going to go ahead and flatten it because I can always go back and get this. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten that just for the sake of the demonstration. So that's one of my design snippets. Now I now have a new texture with text on it and an edge overlay. So that's one of my design elements. That's a my little snippet.
Mm-hmm.
Now
that's so cool how you just build up these component parts.
And sometimes it's good to just play, just have fun and play and do little design snippets. I think sometimes with the age of social media, we think everything has to be shared. And I think when you're designing, a lot of your process is just in your private library.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm going to build up that little decal thing. And that's actually in the collection as well, right here. But we're going to go ahead and build that because I gave you all the elements for that as well. So I'm just going to open up the vintage element that's just a transparent overlay. And I'm going to duplicate this image, duplicate. And I'm going to, a lot of my overlays are in black and white and grayscale. So I'm going to change the mode to color because I'm going to need to work in color now. So just do RGB color. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put a background layer, by the way. My background is already white. So I just have to do layer, new. Wait, hold on a second here. I got to add a layer. I'm going to hold down Command or Control and hit the plus sign on the layer masks to put a layer underneath my decal. And then I'm going to do layer, new, background from layer. And that gives me a background layer so I can see what I'm doing. All right, so I was looking at this and I'm thinking, when I was first designing, I thought, well, okay, what can I put in the middle there? Well, how about some vintage French script? That's kind of a nice design element. So I'm going to go over and get some script. And I think I got this one, number 23. I'm going to bring that over there. Just plop it down. And it's bigger than I want it to be. Actually, right now, I'm going to put both of these as smart objects. That's where I can resize things and I don't lose any quality. So holding down Control on PC, I'd be right-clicking in the layer. I'm going to put this down and do Convert to Smart Object on the script. And I'm going to select the ornament layer. Do the same thing, hold on Control on Mac or right-click on PC and do Convert to Smart Object. That way I can resize those if I want to. And I'm going to resize this a little bit. Let's see.
I love the detail of these elements, Leslie.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's about where I had it. That's good. So obviously now I don't want the script all over the place. I want it contained within that circle. So I need to make myself a little mask. And by the way, I'm going to put this above my ornament. I'm going to turn it off for a minute. And I'm going to go over here and grab the shapes and get the ellipse tool. Switch to white. So I'm going to do X to switch my foreground and background colors. And I'm just going to drag out an ellipse that is pretty much the same shape is that center area. Okay, and I'm going to put it underneath the script layer, turn the script layer back on again, and now I'm going to clip that to the shape layer. And I'm doing it again. I'm going to hold down that Option or Alt key, hover between the layers, and click. So now that's constrained to that. It's like a little mask for us. All right, so I've got this so far. I like that, but you know, let's try to find some more interest for that center area. So I went back to that same my Also Vintage collection, which is in the Complete Inspirational, and I picked up one of these vintage butterflies. I thought that would go kind of fun in there. And I'm going to put that up a little bit, get rid of the clipping mask, and it's a little bit small. And now I could probably enlarge this a bit, but this ornament's really big. So I think I'm instead going to resize the ornament and the script. So I'm going to select my script layer, the shape layer, and the ornament layer by holding on Shift and selecting all of those. Do Command or Control T, and those are already all smart objects. So I can reshape that. I'm going to hold on my Option or Alt key so that it's centered. Let's get this back over here. Let's see. And that's pretty good. And that way, that butterfly, I like it kind of going over the edges a bit there. So that was like that was my little design snippet for this session. I'm going to save this. Maybe I'll get some of my background. Okay. Close up that butterfly. Okay, now for our third design snippet, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but you know, at one point I was just, you know, at a later date, I thought, you know, what could I do with this decom? Maybe I could put it in something else. So I started, you know, thinking about things, and I decided to, that was when I decided, you know, I like this color kind of would go nicely with this texture that I'd already made. You know, I'd already made this design element. And I thought, well, that would go nicely with that butterfly that has nice variegated blues and yellows and blacks rather. So then I thought, okay, well, how can I put those together? And I thought, well, let me use a photo mask. So I have a lot of photo masks in the collection. And let's see, where are you? Photo masks, there we are. And some of them I've actually already made into sort of design snippets by combining them with vintage elements. And everything that I've done to create this photo mask is in the collection. So this is what I call an embellished photo mask. I took photo mask, I think I took a kind of a watercolor mask that's in the collection, and then I combined it with some vintage elements, and even you can see in here I used one of the grunge overlays in the collection, and I made photo mask using a lot of different elements. And I'm not going to go through doing that today for time's sake, but I just wanted you to know that you could create that part too. But for today, I'm just going to, let me delete this as well. Excuse me, duplicate, close up my original, and that's probably also in grayscale. Yes, I'm going to hit that, change that to black, to excuse me, color. And as I have this already open, I'm just going to, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer so that it's on a different layer, and just fill the background layer with white. So I can work with this document. So I'm going to drag my mask in to this, hold on my shift key so it's centered. And my texture is a lot bigger, so I'm going to put it above the photo mask. I'm going to clip it to the photo mask again, holding on the Option Alt and hovering between the layers and clip it. I'm going to resize the texture. So I'm going to do Command T on the texture. Hello, Command T, there we go. Hold on Option and just bring that down till it, come on. All right, hit Enter. Let's crop out some of the excess in this design. We don't need all of that. Okay, so now I have a new element, a new design element. That is this embellished photo mask with that texture, that watercolor texture with the vintage French script. Now I can see right away I need a little more oomph to this. I'm going to do a levels adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to my layers panel and select levels. And I'm going to also clip that to the stack I've got going here. You can just keep clipping as much as you like and just make that a little bit darker. There, so it really shows up. Save that. I can now close that. All right. So for the purposes, because we're going to be adding this to this design, I'm going to duplicate this, close out my originals. I keep my layered original, and I'm going to merge all this. I can always go back to my original if I need to. I'm going to select everything and do Command E to merge. It just makes my new design a little bit easier. So I'm going to drag it into my new design, hold down Shift, and there's my design so far. And I'm liking that. But I thought, you know, I'd like to see a little something extra in here. It needs something, it needs a little more depth to it. So I'm going to put a little bit of watercolor spatter. Let me save this. So I'm going to go back to my masks, and I'm going to choose number 7, which is a watercolor mask. And I'm going to go ahead and close this up because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to drag this over, hold on Shift to center it. Now it's too big right now, so I'm going to resize it. Just a little bit. Oh, actually, first I think I'm going to, I don't want all of this going outside of the photo mask. So I'm going to put a layer mask on this. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to select my mask, do Command A to select all, let me Control A on the PC, Command or Control C for copy. And then I'm going to go back here, add a layer mask, hold down Option or Alt to just get my layer mask, and I'm going to paste in my photo mask into my layer mask. And do Command or Control I to reverse it. And now it's, that's funny. Did I move something accidentally? It's a little bit off. I must have accidentally touched something because it was a little bit off. There, we got that pretty good. So that's now constrained to just my photo mask.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to add a color. I'm going to colorize that by adding a clipping mask. So I'm going to go back and add a solid color adjustment layer. And I'm going to hit that yellow again, clip it to it. So do Option or Alt and hover. And now I'm going to do my blend mode to color burn. And it just gives a little bit of extra something to that. I'm going to resize. I think I want this to be, want to resize my mask, that mask a little bit. I'm going to unhook it from the layer mask for a minute because I want to only transform, resize the mask, not the layer mask. Command T. I'm just going to resize that a little bit. Bring it in. And let's do a little bit of distortion. I just want to bring that corner down there up a little bit. There you go. And now I'm going to re-hook up my layer mask by using by selecting that chain in the middle of the layer mask, between the layer mask and the layer. Was that clear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Let us know in the live chat, everyone. Are you following along okay? But so beautiful, to be honest. I just love watching you work, Leslie.
Oh, thank you. So that just, it gets a little more depth to design, and it kind of replicates this variegation that I have in the butterfly. I'm now getting some variegation in my background as well. So getting a repeat of design elements in there. And now I want something a little more design element into that. So I'm going to add some watercolor spatter. I love using watercolor spatter. So I'm going to select the layer above my script and go pick up some watercolor. Whoops. Go to bridge and pick up some of the watercolor spatter from this collection. I'm going to take this kind of golden yellow watercolor, and it has a transparent background already. So I'm going to pull that in.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So that's, wow, I went through that pretty fast, didn't I? Oh, actually, I've got one more thing. I've got some fine, I'm looking at this and I'm realizing I'd like to have a little more emphasis on these outer areas. They're kind of getting lost a little bit, the kind of outer details of this vintage design, the kind of curlicues and ornamental parts. I'd like to get that a little more emphasis. So I'm going to put a burn dodge layer above my textured script layer. And for a burn dodge layer, I'm going to add a layer, and we're going to fill it with 50% gray. So I'm going to do Shift Delete to bring up my dialog box. I already have 50% gray selected here. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to set that blend mode of that layer to overlay. And because overlay is a contrast blend mode, when you do 50% gray, it doesn't see it. The layer, you can't even see it. And the only reason you're putting 50% gray is it helps you see what's going on. You don't have to put 50% gray in there. You could just have a blank layer. You could just have like but it just helps you can see what you're doing. And I can also look in my layer pan and go, oh, that's my burn dodge layer.
I always wonder what the point of the 50% gray was, because you're right, you don't need it, but as a visual reference, so you can see in the layer palette an overview, because if you're painting like really low opacity burning,
right,
you're not going to see it on a transparent layer. That makes sense.
Yeah, and plus you can you can see what's going on with your burn dodge, but also in your layer panel, it's a clear indicator. Oh, this is my burn dodge layer. Whereas before, when I first started doing this, I would just put a blank layer, and then I'd label the layer burn dodge layer.
Got it.
This just makes it easier. Okay, so I'm going to select a brush, and I want to B on the keyboard or just select it, and I want to get a nice big soft round brush. I'm going to get my black back as my foreground, so I'm going to do X. And I think 50%, 100% might be good. Let's see. I'm just going to, that's too much. Back away. Command Z. Let's do about 40%. That's better. bring that down a little bit. I'm just giving it a little bit of oomph on the edges. And I use a burn dodge layer on almost everything I do, photographically or design.
Yeah, that really adds a lot.
Yeah, it really helps bring the edges in better. Okay. Okay, let me just go real quick and we'll look at it on a t-shirt mock-up just for the fun of it.
That's really good. One of the questions was, do you ever use mock-ups?
I love mock-ups. They are so awesome.
Yes,
it
they
really helps you to validate your design and kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I love this mock-up because it's it really shows that vintage doesn't have to be kind of old-fashioned. It can be, you can use vintage elements for a really modern edge. It can be very edgy design.
That's a cool mock-up, actually. It's not like really wooden, just stood there looking overly formal. You know, it looks more natural.
All right. Wow, I breezed right through that.
You did. Are you happy if we jump into some Q&A in a second?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Perfect. So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you because as ever, I was just mesmerized by your teaching style. And I know you're not reading the comments as we're going through here, but people were being so complimentary. I think everyone found it super clear. So again, let us know in the chat, did you enjoy the session? And let's give it up for Leslie and show her some love in the live chat, please, guys. Yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah, and please let me know if there's something that wasn't quite clear, something you want me to go over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And please do get involved. We got a little extra time today for Q&A. So if you click on ask a question below this live stream, submit your questions. You know, Leslie is kindly giving up her time. And so let's pick her brain. It was Marie, by the way, that asked about t-shirt mock-ups. But yeah, I think that was a great example. So the first tons of comments coming in as well. I think everyone enjoyed that session. Marie asks as well, where and how do you find inspiration for vintage t-shirt designs? What elements would you say are kind of made for vintage designs? For example, a cell phone probably wouldn't work, but obviously in this case, the butterfly works really well.
Yeah, and this wonderful ornament too. I mean, I just love this ornamental, this vintage ornament. This comes off of a vintage French invoice. I just love those designs.
The script text?
Well, the script is one thing. Yeah, a script is always great to use. But let me go back to, actually, it's probably open still. Yeah, here we go. Let me go up to the vintage collection. And, you know, things like this are really great. You know, any kind of ornamental designs. This was what I used for the background, the photo mask. I used that in that photo mask. That'd be a great element for a t-shirt. Butterflies. This might be a great part of the design.
Like heraldry and that kind of thing.
Yeah, heraldry cut type things, ornamental things.
Floral, I guess, as well.
Yeah, you do floral, script, music.
Diane asks, how do you make the vintage elements transparent?
That's
a lot of work that went into it.
It's more than a 5-minute answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see up here in some of the areas where I've shown you the original. I gave you the original and the script area. So it's a matter, you need to strip out the colors, clean them up, and then make them transparent, which it'd be kind of complicated to go into right now.
It's a lot of cleanup though.
It's a lot of cleanup. I spent a lot of time cleaning things up because once you change, like especially these really old vintage things that are like, you know, really, this is like script from like 1700s, sometimes even the 1600s. That paper does not clean up super easy. So there's a lot of cleanup once you change that to black and white.
We've got a question from MFH who asks about dodge and burning. Would you be able to show that last part again super quick? Would that be okay, Leslie?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. That's fine.
Thank you.
Let's see. Let me just see if I can go to a different... Does it make sense to go to a different document or not? Yeah, we'll just do something. We'll just do a new... I'm going to add another burn dodge layer. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer in my layer panel. And once again, if you do Shift Delete, that brings up your fill dialog box. Otherwise, you could also, I do this, I do shortcuts so long, I sometimes forget where the heck they are. I think it's Edit Fill. Yeah, you could do Edit Fill as well. And in that contents, you'll be able to do foreground, background, etc. There's also 50% gray and 100%. I could actually, I suppose I never do it that way. I don't know if I usually just do normal and then change it to overlay. So now anything I do, and you can do anything. You could do a gradient on there. You could brush, you could use a gradient. You could do anything on that layer. Let's just take a brush and so you could see things better. Let's do a hard one maybe. And let's do it 100% so you can really see what I'm doing. So I just hit 0 on my keyboard. And let's just, well, actually, let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
I'm just going to town. I would never actually want to do that. But just to
Some serious
really show, just so you could see what. And then if I show you just my burn dodge layer, it's a gray layer with, how did I get this? It must be accidentally moving things.
Yeah.
I don't usually normally, I'm distracted, I guess. You can see what it looks like there.
So yeah, obviously you cut back and you drop the opacity and soften the brush.
You could actually on your burn dodge layer, it's usually overlay, but you could also do soft light for a softer effect usually. And you can change the opacity. I mean, I did like an extreme example there, just so you could see what I was doing. I would usually be doing, a soft brush and maybe 10, 20%, and then building up from there.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Hopefully, MFH, hopefully that helps with your dodging and burning.
I want to show you this. Sorry, Tom. I want to show you one more thing about burn dodge layers. I do that so often. I have condensed all those steps down into an action. So I have a little action here, and I just do burn dodge layer, boom, done. So that's something you might want to look into. You could do all those steps.
That's really clever, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Tom. What were you saying?
We've got a couple of questions from Sam and someone else, Sam and Alex, who ask about the busyness of the design. And I think what they're getting at is, when is it too busy? And you seem to just wonderfully get this balance right every time, because this is inherently is quite a busy design, right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of detail,
very busy, yeah.
But it feels beautiful and balanced. I know I've done it where I've made it too busy in the past.
Well, I mean, you only see the things that I do great. I think 80% of your design work is not going to be great. And that's the way it is. I think that, I saw a comment one time on a Facebook group. Someone was bemoaning that 80% of their design work was no good. And I thought, yeah, that's the way it should be. Because you should it's just working. It's doing sketches. It's doing this and that. And then at a certain point, something will just fall in place and then things will work out. And it's just a lot of that's just a matter of getting a feel for what your style is and practice. Someone else might look at this and think, ooh, that's too busy for me. I don't like it.
Yeah.
So for my personal taste,
there's no magic bullet, is there, Leslie?
No, it's getting to know what you like. You might, I'm a Pinterest addict. I look at Pinterest all the time. So I'm kind of like stoking those fires, looking at things I like, saving things I like. and the rest is play. Do those little design snippets, and then at some point you'll be working on design and you think, wow, I think I want to take that little ornament thing I made and I want to do something to bring in that yellow, and I want to make a t-shirt design. And then things will just start falling together, and start falling together because you've done these other little steps, these little sketches, these little practice things.
Do you mind if we just discuss this a little further? Because I've got a couple of thoughts on this, and I'd be interested to hear your views, Leslie.
Yeah, let's do.
So I think when it comes to busyness, like this design we're looking at, it's busy in terms of there's a lot of detail, right? They're quite ornate illustrations. We've got lots of different layers going on. So it's busy in that sense. But in terms of a composition, it's actually not that busy and not that complex. And so I think composition is one element to look at. Like we can see here, it's quite symmetrical. And so if it didn't have the symmetry, it would seem even busier and even more kind of crazy to look at. But the symmetry really helps the eye to kind of flow down it quite naturally. So that would be one element.
That's true. Thinking about design elements in general. So symmetry, the other thing is
framing, like negative
framing.
space. So it can breathe.
I just forgot what I was going to say.
Oh no, sorry, Leslie. Sorry to interject.
It'll come back. Let's just keep going.
Apologies.
I bet Matt has a lot of things he could throw in there too about
absolutely. I mean, as we look at this design, you've clearly got the central element which pulls your eye in. This is also more saturated, and so we've got saturation going on as well, and that kind of saturated strip across the middle.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Two things actually. Repetition in design. So you might have a repeating element, maybe not literally, but I have a repetition between the variegated color in the butterfly and the variegated color in the background. So there's some repetition of element. And then also think about differentiating of sizes.
Yeah.
I see one mistake I see a lot with beginning designers is everything has the same weight visually.
Yeah.
And so think about maybe making one thing bigger and one thing smaller, make it, have a variety of sizes in your design. Here we have, in some ways this ornament and an ornament, there's some repetition going on there, but they're different sizes, so they're not competing with each other. So definitely bring in your design elements of repetition, color, symmetry, differentiation in size.
You've got the valleys as well. So obviously you've got quite dark colors happening with that contrast in the center, and then the rest that frames it, aren't quite as bold. Matt says the eye sees it as distinct elements and blocks in this case, I think, which makes it appear less overwhelming.
Great.
So shall we have some fun for a second, Leslie? Because we do have a bit of extra time today.
Yeah.
Shall we try and unbalance this piece just to kind of prove the point?
Let's see.
So I wonder if with that background, if we made it instead of that kind of knocked back orange, if that was almost black as well. So it was like as bold as the center.
Actually, I can just turn off the texture. Well, actually, you just kind of lose everything then because of the black on that.
Yeah. Or if it was darker, I guess.
What if we change the color? Let's see if that changes anything. Let's do a hue saturation layer above my texture. And let's change the color. Of course, it's going to be kind of garish because we're just playing around, but it might give us an idea of, does it work differently with a different color? Does that still work?
Not as much. Now it feels busier in my eyes. And then I wonder if we punch out the French script even more. So it's kind of distracting. Can we do that?
Let's see if we could add some contrast. So I'll do another levels layer above that, and let's just make that really dark and the script really overwhelming. And of course, if this is really garish, and no one would probably actually do this, but it's just kind of to make the point.
Yeah, and the point is that's a couple of tweaks, and it kind of throws a lot of things out. So often I think the balance and it not being overwhelmingly busy comes from the subtle nuances.
Yeah. Now let's have some fun with the background let me select all of the background stuff. So what if this was closer in size? Does that change anything?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say those were almost the same size.
Yeah, now it feels tight and it feels busier for sure.
Yeah, it's like everything's just competing because it's just everything's the same size. We don't have any breathing room in there.
My eye feels like it just got energy, but in a bad way, like it's jumping around all over the place.
And conversely, like if we had, let's see, let me undo that.
I think Matt nailed it with the fact your eye groups things naturally.
Yeah. And let's see, it doesn't really work with this design, so it's kind of hard for me to do, but I'm going to duplicate this real quick. Image, duplicate. And I'm just going to turn off that background stuff. Let's say we have this element here, and then we bring in something else, like, I don't know. I'm just kind of randomly selecting things, so this may not make sense at all anyway, but I just want to bring about the point that if we were to put a bunch of things next to each other or the same size, and this isn't really working so much because I'm not finding the right elements to do that, but if there are a bunch of elements about the same size, your eye doesn't really go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't think I'm really doing it, but the point is having a differentiation in size values is really important too.
And then a lot of it as well comes down to the intention behind the piece and the context. So, for example, we've seen in the world of digital scrapbooking, often you can get much busier, collage-y themed pieces. And they can be more abstract, but they evoke a certain emotion or mood or memory capturing or whatever it might be. And that's appropriate for the context. But for something like a t-shirt design, it wouldn't work as well because it would be too busy.
Right. But and I think scrapbooking has some really incredible design work going on these days. It's really fantastic designs out there for scrapbooking. But one thing that they do is even in scrapbooking, there might be a lot of stuff going on, but there might be like the actual photograph will be in an area where maybe there's some space or there's a photo mat behind it. So there's some differentiation of the space too, usually going on.
Mm-hmm. But to my point, you don't often see digital scrapbooking work on a t-shirt.
True.
But here we're kind of designing it for purpose.
Right. And of course, with digital scrapbooking, it's usually a square, and here we've broken out of that square. So when we put on the t-shirt, it's just this design without square edges. So that helps too. But
yeah, hopefully Sam and Alex, that helps. And Leslie, apologies. Hopefully it wasn't too painful to unbalance your design intentionally.
No, it's great. It's great to deconstruct and figure out why something's working or not working.
Mm-hmm. Marie's got a great question. How do you ensure the vintage elements you find are copyright free or Creative Commons?
Well, all of my vintage stuff is stuff I've purchased myself. That's an original that I know is from like before 1923, and it's mine. I own it. I'm not taking it from anyone else, and that's not a reproduction. I'm not buying someone's vintage book and scanning it and reproducing. So these are all from things that I purchased myself that I know are originals and that are very old, either because they have a date, like some of this French script might have a date in it, or let's say I scan an invoice that has a date, or it's the style. It's sometimes it's pretty clear that if you know vintage things that it's old.
Yeah.
So that's how I ensure that my designs are copyright free.
But you know what? This is why I have such a deep appreciation for people like you and the products you create, because in terms of our community, you could do it yourself, but we get the behind the scenes insight as to what it takes. And what it takes can be scouring and spending months or even years investing in these things and bidding on auctions and getting the source materials. It can be cost in terms of even, we've worked with plenty of people who get lawyers involved just to validate the fact that it is out of copyright, just to be super safe. It's up to hundreds of hours of carefully pixel perfect extraction of these things and transposing it into a digital format. So it really is a process. And that's why it makes me super happy for our community. They can just get access to all of that for such a nominal cost.
Yeah. I mean, really, for me, I spend countless hours searching auctions and thousands of dollars every year. And over 10 years, that's a lot of money. And then there's countless hours scanning, cleaning, making the overlays.
Yeah, it's real work. That's what I was trying to get across, really. It doesn't happen by magic. It really can be a full-time job. So thank goodness for people like you, Leslie, that equip the rest of us with these awesome vintage resources. And they're so authentic. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if we've got any final questions that we haven't covered. We've got a question from Sneha Lata who asks, can we use vintage typography with this kind of design?
Yeah, that would be, I was actually thinking, where could you put some kind of text on there? You could get an awesome vintage font and write something on there. I'm not sure what yet, but in your design, you could get a really cool vintage type and write something on there.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Just have fun. I think that's the answer. And as you said before, maybe 80-90% is not going to work. I do design work all the time that doesn't work. In fact, that is design?
That is, it's part of the process. And I think, in these days of social media and everything's instant, digital cameras, social media, we think that everything has to be shared. But a lot of your design work is just your building blocks and your practice. You should be sharing only maybe 20% of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. And thank you, Matt, as well. Again, I'll refer back to Matt's insight earlier about that kind of how the eye works. Trust Matt, he's a creative director. Of course, he knows about these things. But it's so true. It's you can understand it on quite a scientific level, really. It's just that how the eye naturally groups and clumps things together is something I really want to educate myself better about, because I find it fascinating. And Leslie, you are a master of the art. I have to say, your designs are always very, very balanced.
Always lovely to be here. And always lovely to hang out with you guys. It's lovely comments. I really appreciate it. All right. So this collection, I really designed this collection to be really, it kind of encompasses the way I design, the way I create graphics and the way I design. So it has a ton of a variety of elements that all work together for really, really a wide variety of purposes. So there are 4 texture collections. By the way, it's really large, extra large graphics in this. So there's Bliss, which is watercolor textures. Bloom, which is acrylic paint textures. Magpie, which is in a kind of an eclectic collection of just really handy textures. I'll show you closer as we get into it. And Bohème is a collection where I've used all the elements, well, not all the elements, but I've used elements in the collection and put them together to kind of show you how those work together. So we have pattern overlays, we have edge overlays, grunge overlays, clipping masks, watercolor spatter, acrylic spatter, vintage ornamentals, and vintage elements.
That butterfly looks rather familiar.
Yeah. So this is the Bliss collection. It's the watercolor collection. So there's various watercolor, sprayed watercolor, spattered watercolor, painted watercolor. Here's some zoomed in details from those watercolor collections.
And I have to say, I think you legit might be the best texture creator I've ever met in my life, Leslie.
It means so much to me, Tom.
I've dabbled in this myself, like the sharpness of them. Like I'll zoom in and they're so gigantic, but they are so crisp and so sharp. I don't know quite how you do it, but your textures are unlike anyone else's.
Thank you, Tom. It really means a lot to me. So this is an idea, like using all the elements for an imaginary perfume design. This is my design. I've demoed this before on a live session, you guys might remember. But there's patterns, there's vintage elements. I've combined this with my flower photographs. There's script, there's watercolor. You can use, here's a watercolor texture, one of the script watercolor textures with my peony flowers. And there's also a little ornament in there. We have watercolor spatter overlays. Here's an idea for a flower photograph with some watercolor spatter. And then we have the Bloom collection, which is acrylic paint. Some details from the Bloom collection.
Matt's geeking out over this pack. I love these so much. They make me so happy.
This is watercolor spatter. This was the acrylic spatter. Excuse me.
You need to sell that packaging. Like that needs to be in a high-end hotel in London or something.
It'd be fun gift wrap too, wouldn't it? For birthday, maybe. So they're black and white, but you can layer them up with colors and get a nice design. Or you can put them in like this is a photograph that I did a more subtle approach with some acrylic spatter overlays on that. Here's a little bit zoomed in detail of that. Magpie, I actually use Magpie a lot for my design work. It's kind of a great collection of what I call base textures that you can really use as a base to create other designs on or mix with other things.
That gold, so cool.
There's gold paint, there's crackled, there's crumpled paper, there's vintage paper, there's stone, there's pastel papers, there's glass emulsion. Here's some zoomed in parts of Magpie. Then we have clipping masks that are watercolor, there's brayer roller masks, there's emulsion masks, and then I have 5 embellished masks. Those embellished masks have vintage elements and watercolor spatter and stuff on them. Then we have our edge overlays, which are fantastic for building up your designs.
Heading there.
Yeah, an edge. My other one's mask it, get an edge. So we just did this one. We added some depth to that watercolor. You can either use edge overlays to kind of burn your edges, get kind of an organic textured burn, or there's some more decorative edges for like borders.
Ellie asks, in this product, are there any elements that have been featured in other collections of yours, Leslie?
No, it's all unique to this. Yeah. And here are some grunge overlays. You can add a little more grunge or depth to your images. Here's an example of using a craquelure texture overlay on your texture. Bohème, I've used various elements of the collection and created new textures here. So there's just pattern stripes, there's vintage elements, there's edge overlays, there's watercolor spatter. So I've used used elements in the collection to create new textures.
This honestly speaks to my soul. And Lucia's, by the sound of it. She says, I'm crying. It's so great.
Oh, thank you.
Like I feel like I want to just be very rude and like prematurely cut this live session short and go create. Every time I see this pack, I just want to go make stuff.
So then we have a bunch, and we've already showed you a bunch of vintage here, but I'm going to just scroll through because we have been showing you guys vintage already tonight. There's that t-shirt we just did, more vintage. This is a detail from the Bohème collection showing using this actually uses one of the acrylic paint textures with some of the vintage elements. And also there's some pattern overlays. There's vintage ornaments. There's some frames. There's patterns. So basically all kinds of goodies that you can use to really build up some yummy layered details and layered interest.
Amazing. Amy said just purchased this amazing pack. Fabulous.
Thank you, Amy. So you can just really have fun designing things. This is a design using my flowers. I use a photo filter on my flower images, and then I combine them with some of the patterns, a vintage butterfly, some watercolor spatter. So it's a lot of fun.
It's a ton of fun.
I find myself constantly coming to this collection.
So remember, if you love the look of this collection, and frankly, I can't see how you wouldn't, remember it is 30% off for a very limited time. So you can get it for just $27, which is ridiculous. To be honest, it's like a bundle in itself. It's like so many different packs combined into one. It's massive. And let us see what you create as well.
Yes, I would love to see. If you want to share things in the Design Cuts Facebook group and tag me, I'll come take a look. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, 1,000%. We always love to see the work of the design cutters. You're a very, very talented bunch out there in the community. And, we just love seeing everyone celebrate each other's work as well.
Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I always love hanging out with you. And thank you for the lovely comments.
Leslie, thank you. We really, really appreciate your time as ever. That was super fun to hang out with you. And we can't wait to welcome you back in the near future.
Thanks, Tom. Always awesome.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.